Hi everyone, welcome to another of our broadcasts. In our last broadcast, we were thinking about the purpose of the law in the Bible, and I suggested two purposes of the law. One, that it shows us the moral perfection of God Himself. All law ultimately is based on the character of God. Law is the natural outworking of who God is. The other purpose of the law in the Bible is that it would show us our sin. Romans chapter 7 and verse 7 is relevant here, where Paul says, "If it hadn't been for the law, I would not have known sin. For I would not have known what it is to covet if the law had not said, 'You shall not covet.'" So the law, if you like, shows us that we are not righteous. The law emphasizes that we are sinners, that we are in need of forgiveness, that we are in need of salvation. And we finished last time by thinking about that the law also, therefore, points us to Jesus Christ. Paul calls it our schoolmaster, which leads us to Christ. Now, in our last broadcast, I said there were various purposes of the law in regards to how it is used in the Bible. And today we want to look at other purposes, or at least one other purpose. One of the purposes of the law of God is in order that it would restrain sin within humanity. Where you don't have law, you eventually find it leads to anarchy. In other words, it leads to people doing whatever they want for their own selfish ends and self-interests, and that invariably results in the breakdown of society. The law is there to provide us with stability, to provide us with standards of what is right and what is wrong, and threatening punishment to those who break the law. If there was no law that forbade stealing, no law that forbade murder, if there was no law against drug use and no punishment threatened against anyone who did these things, then what you would discover is that these things would increase in society. Thefts, murders, and drugs use would greatly increase. The law is there to curb our sin. It's there to encourage societal life, people being able to live together. And yet, the reality is that sadly, God's law is often ignored. And when society ignores God's law, society deteriorates. We see that in the Bible. The time of the judges, the record of the times is every man did what was right in his own eyes. In other words, he just totally ignored the law and did what he wanted to do. And society then deteriorated, and indeed, many times it seemed as though it was going to disintegrate. We can certainly see that in our society today. God's law is ignored. Man makes his own laws, which are contrary to the law of God. And you see a moral decline that goes along with that. And with that, a deterioration moving towards disintegration in society. Evil, wrong increases, and righteousness, obedience to God's law, decreases. And this is to the detriment of any society. The Bible says righteousness is what exalts a nation. Sin is a reproach to any people. Sin, of course, is the transgression of the law. The civil law of God was given to Israel to show them how they were to live together, individually, as families, and as a society, for the good of all concerned, and of course, ultimately, for the glory of God. To the extent that they failed, to the extent that they disobeyed God's law, to that extent, society deteriorated. And moved along the road to disintegration. Life without any law is chaos. The law is there for our good, personally and corporately. So one of the purposes of the law is to restrain evil. And in order that that happens, we are to be obedient to the law. And our prayer is that God will help us to be those who love his law and those who are obedient to his law for our own good, for the good of others, and ultimately, of course, for the glory of God. We'll have another look at another aspect of the purpose of the law in our next broadcast. But until then, every blessing.